processing counter at Ortelsic station smelled like recycled air and something faintly mineral, the way every transit hub smells when it's been sealed against vacuum for long enough that the ventilation starts pulling trace compounds out of the walls. I'd been sitting in the intake queue for 40 minutes with my helmet in my lap and a paper cup of something the dispenser called a warm beverage, which it was, technically, in the same way that a puddle is technically water. I didn't mind. After 6 weeks in a contested zone relay bunk, waiting for a transfer authorization that kept bouncing back unsigned, I had developed a talent for sitting still. The Vethaal processing clerk, her desk tag read Sevorath, sub-register 3rd tier, had not looked up from her classification ledger since I sat down. The ledger was a physical thing, surprised me the first time I saw one. I'd expected holographic displays and automated intake scanners. The Vethaal used those too. The senior intake forms were handwritten, in their own script, because their species relations archivists had decided 200 years ago that automated classification was philosophically unsound. Every sentient being deserved the weight of a hand recording their particulars. I had read this in the transit briefing. I found it genuinely admirable, and also at that moment, a little inconvenient because the woman writing in the ledger had very precise penmanship and she was taking her time. She asked me the standard questions without looking up. Name, rank, origin station, species classification for cross-registry, duration of contested service. I answered each one in order, and she wrote each answer in the relevant column with the particular kind of focused silence that very competent bureaucrats achieve when the work is beneath their full attention, but they are doing it correctly anyway. Then she said, "Helmet, please," face down on the counter. I set the cup down and turned the helmet over and slid it across the desk to her. She picked it up, glanced at the interior fitting for my service branch emblem, and then turned it to read the stencil on the back. The stencil was standard intake processing issue. Every human who'd come through a Vethaal-administered contested zone transit hub in the past 8 years got one assigned on first entry. A sequential number in black stencil ink on the rear panel just above the neck seal. Mine said, in large block numerals, 0004. Sevorath looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at it for another moment. She set the helmet down carefully. You set something down when you are not sure it is real, and you don't want to disturb it by handling it too firmly. She opened a second ledger from the shelf below the counter. She checked something in it. She opened it to a different page and checked something else. She picked the helmet back up, turned it, read the number again, and set it down again. I drank the warm beverage. "This number," she said. "Yes," I said. "This is your assigned processing number from first entry." "It is," I said. She looked at her ledger. She looked at me. She looked back at the ledger. "There are 3 entries before yours," she said. "That's right," I said. I was the 4th human to come through a Vethaal transit hub in a contested zone classification. "The first 3 entries," she said, "all listed as," she stopped. She consulted the second ledger again. "The first entry is closed. Status, non-continuing." She paused. "Second entry is closed. Status non-continuing." She paused again. "The third entry is closed. Status non-continuing." "Yes," I said. She looked at me for a longer time than she had looked at anything else since I sat down. I got the impression she was trying to decide whether to continue with the standard intake form. "Non-continuing," I said helpfully, "means deceased." "I know what it means," she said. "I know you do," I said. "I just thought I'd confirm we were on the same page." She put her pen down. This was, I would later understand, a significant gesture. Sevorath, sub-register 3rd tier, had been processing contested zone transit intake for 11 years. She had put her pen down mid-form exactly once before, during a filing discrepancy involving a diplomatic double entry that had triggered an interspecies incident review. She did not put her pen down for routine processing anomalies. She said, "I don't have a current classification row for a 4th instance of species in which all 3 prior instances are listed as non-continuing." "It does seem like a gap," I said. "The form assumes," she said slowly, choosing her words with the precision of someone who is being careful not to say what they are actually thinking, "that the classification grid accommodates all presented combinations." I am looking at the grid. I want you to understand that I am not, in any sense, saying that your presence is a problem. I am saying that the grid," she stopped. "Doesn't have a row for this," I finished. "Doesn't have a row for this," she agreed. I finished the warm beverage. I set the cup down on the counter with the small hollow sound that empty paper cups make. Outside the station windows, 3 of them, running floor to ceiling in pale processed daylight, the docking arms of Ortesic Station moved in their slow mechanical arcs, the same way they had been moving for 30 years, indifferent to whatever was happening at sub-register 3rd tier's intake desk. Sev Orath did something I had not seen a Vethaal clerk do. She reached under the counter and pressed a call tab. A second Vethaal arrived within 2 minutes. This one wore a different sash, the color of a senior registrar, I thought, though I was not fluent in the rank markings. Sev Orath turned the helmet to show him the stencil. The senior registrar looked at it. He looked at me. He looked at Sev Orath. He asked her something in their own language, which I don't speak well, but I caught the word for sequential, and I caught the word for fourth, and I caught the word that roughly translates as unprecedented, in the sense of there being no precedent rather than in the sense of being impressive, though in this case I suspect both applied. He pressed a different call tab. I asked Sev Orath if the dispensing machine at the far wall also dispensed the warm beverage in a larger size. She said she believed it did. I got up, crossed the room, fed a transit credit into the machine, and came back with a larger cup. I sat back down. The individual who arrived in response to the second call tab wore a registration sash I'd never seen, deep gray-green, with a lateral stripe in a color I had no name for. He was introduced to me as Archivist Vethaal, from the Species Relations Documentation Division on the 2nd floor above. He looked at the helmet. He looked at the number. He produced his own ledger, a much thicker one, from a bag he was carrying. The 3 of them conferred at the far end of the counter for several minutes. I could hear, if not follow, the conversation. It had the sound of a conversation in which everyone is being professionally calm, and none of them feels calm. Archivist Vethaal came to the counter and addressed me directly. He said, and he said this in clear, careful standard registry language, the kind used for formal documentation, that my processing intake form would require a temporary classification extension, pending a review of the constituted zone entry protocols as they applied to species with no surviving prior instance registrants in the current transit cycle. He said this would take some time. He said he hoped I would be comfortable waiting. I told him I was very comfortable waiting. He asked, particular formal courtesies. The Vethaal use when they are genuinely uncertain how to phrase something. What had happened to the first 3? I thought about that for a moment. The first one had been a survey technician named Priya Otten, who'd gone into the Kesvar Reach before the transit protocols even existed, before anyone knew what they were walking into. The second had been a Marine Staff Sergeant named Kolvard, who'd held a relay junction for 19 hours alone. The third had been a doctor whose name I had been told once, and had tried not to forget and had forgotten anyway, which I was ashamed of, and I had promised myself I would look it up properly when I had access to a full service registry again. I told the archivist. They were very good at their jobs. Better than me, probably, in most ways that counted. They just got unlucky. Vethaal wrote this down. He wrote it down slowly, in the handwritten ledger, with the weight of a hand recording particulars, the way his people had decided, 200 years ago, that every sentient being deserved. Then he looked up at me with the expression a person gets when they are holding a fact they do not entirely know how to hold, and said, "And you?" I looked at the cup in my hands. Outside the windows, the docking arms kept moving. "I got lucky," I said, "and I'm still here. So," I set the cup down on the counter, "I'd really like to get my transit chit stamped." Sev Orath, sub-register 3rd tier, picked up her pen. She found the nearest blank row. She wrote my name in it.